A relationship that might be, did you do the dishes already? Did you do the dishes already? Did you do the dishes already? And perhaps the answer is no, but I had a sub-tier, the washing machine mechanic, who was late, so therefore I couldn't do the dishes. So it's a sub-tier problem. So I need to let my customer know, or my relationship partner know, what the problem is. If there's a problem outside of my control even, that's still essential to know, both in relationships and supply chain.
Hi, welcome to another episode of Inside Supply Chain. My name is Cathy Carpenter, and I'm here with Derek Baggerly, our North American CEO and fearless leader. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, Derek?
Well, thank you, Cathy. So I joined SupplyOn in 2017 to head up the North American operation. Before that, I started and led a company very similar to SupplyOn right out of college, actually, in 1992. So essentially, I've been doing this kind of role for pretty much my entire adult life.
Great, great. And what are you thinking today are the biggest challenges with supply chain?
So that's a great question. So the big topic these days is all around what is termed supply chain resilience, right? So instead of talking about it in technical terms, since we all talk about our supply chain as partners in this journey, so I want to talk about kind of using relationship metaphors, because I think part of what's needed isn't necessarily different mechanisms or tools, but a different mindset, a different way of thinking about it. So thinking about it in terms of relationships, one of the key things needed is communication, right? All sorts of better communication. How to communicate our needs, how to communicate when there are problems, how to communicate when you have something go wrong, right? So there are ways in which we communicate with each other. For humans, we require words. We are not yet capable of transmitting thoughts with our mind. We also have emails when things aren't available in person. So that kind of communication becomes absolutely critical between supply chains, right? So just as in with relationships, there has to be a lot of positive communication between the partners in order for it to be successful. So another pillar of a healthy relationship is trust and vulnerability, right? You can't really have a healthy relationship without trust and vulnerability. And it sounds maybe soft and whatever, but it's really not. I mean, vulnerability is essentially courage, right? You have to be open to talking about, again, what your needs are. What are the problems? What are the challenges that you're facing that you can address together, right? And then we've got essentially a willingness to change. So once you've identified, things in the relationship, if there are pieces that you've identified within the communication, within that trust and vulnerability, what is it that helps us move forward in the relationship? And you have to be willing to, again, either adopt new modes of communication, different types of communication. How do I say things in a more gentle manner with a partner? So once you have a communication and the trust built up, then building on that and being willing to change is really key. So once we talk about linking relationships and supply chain, so from a communication standpoint, there has to be clear expression of supply chain needs, demands, supply chain issues. The trust, of course, the supply chain needs to be able to trust the customer, and the customer needs to be able to trust the supplier enough to share those kinds of things. So the customer has the obligation to share their actual needs and perhaps production schedules so that the supplier knows what's going on. And then the supplier has to be comfortable sharing their production planning and telling the customer essentially, so the customer doesn't have to constantly ask, is it on time? Is it on time? Is it on time? In a relationship, that might be, did you do the dishes already? Did you do the dishes already? Did you do the dishes already? And perhaps the answer is no, but I had a sub-tier, the washing machine mechanic, who was late, so therefore I couldn't do the dishes. So it's a sub-tier problem. So I need to let my customer know, or my relationship partner know, what the problem is. If there's a problem outside of my control even, that's still essential to know, both in relationships and supply chain. And then the willingness to change of, okay, once we have established this, how do we adopt better ways of communicating and establishing trust and investing in things like technology, for example, communication technology, manufacturing, planning technology, to try to continue to develop the relationship.
Mm-hmm. So it's really about that true partnership, right? And just and building that and having that collaboration, where everybody comes together and shares that information. So
right, and which can't be done. Again, it's less of a problem of technology right now. Mm-hmm. It's a problem of establishing that mindset between customer and supplier, where they have the right communication methods and tools, the trust in order to be able to establish that communication, and then the willingness to work forward and change things that need to be changed afterwards.
Right. It's that vulnerability too, because I know suppliers are afraid to share information, customers are afraid to share information. But if you do, then you have, a better level of trust, right? And working relationship.
Exactly. I mean, one of my favorite examples is if problems arise, there's going to be a conversation one way or another, right? It can either be after the product was due or after the relationship commitment has passed. And that's a much more difficult conversation and potentially a more unpleasant one than if you address it when you identify the problem. Mm-hmm. So if you see, hey, for example, the dishwasher mechanic is late. Therefore, dear partner, I cannot fulfill my role of taking care of the dishes. So from a supplier's point of view, dear customer, my sub-tier was late providing me with his part. Therefore, we need to talk about how to mitigate this going forward. Otherwise, we're going to be late.
Right, right. And I know some of the suppliers, they're afraid because they think if they share this information that they're going to lose that deal. But more importantly, what's the outcome of that is they could essentially lose the whole relationship.
Indeed. So that's a great point. So there is, and that gets back to the trust and vulnerability part of suppliers and customers, for that matter, are reluctant to share, especially their problems. Right? Mm-hmm. I mean, similar to a relationship,
right.
We're reluctant to share what is genuinely troubling us. Mm-hmm. But what we found is, with an enhanced level of communication rather than less, because you don't, just with relationships, if you bottle it up and don't talk about something, it's going to come out in some other fashion in the future, most likely, and create a bigger problem in the making. Similar with supply chain. So either you talk about it when you identify the problems, or you have a much worse conversation afterwards. So it's a trust, it's both a trust and communication liability as well.
Right, right. Yeah. And you want to keep everything working and moving and healthy and build those foundations in that relationship and that partnership for ultimate success, right? So, yeah.
And SupplyOn would like to be your therapist in your relationship.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining us today. And if you wanted to contact us for more information or talk directly, with Derek, I can set that up for you. And thank you very much. Have a great day.